They were born from silence, raised in sterilized light beneath Camino's storm-filled skies, not with laughter or lullabies, but with drills, commands, and numbers carved into their very breath. They marched before they walked. They followed orders before they spoke. And from the very beginning, they belonged to someone else. You could see it in their eyes. Identical, yet haunted by different weights, each carrying burdens they didn't choose, each shaped by a war they never started. They fought with pride, but they never asked for glory. They smiled through pain, but they never knew peace. They lived fast, died young, and were mourned by no one but each other. The galaxy watched them bleed, applauded their bravery, then tossed them aside when their usefulness expired. Heroes turned into relics, lives measured in service, never in love, never in dreams, never in futures. Their stories whispered between explosions, fading before they could be remembered. They weren't villains, they weren't pawns. They were men who made choices within cages, who painted their armor not out of rebellion, but out of the desperate need to be seen, to be more than the barcode on their wrist, more than the clone of a bounty hunter, more than disposable. And somehow, against impossible odds, they became unforgettable. Not because of their strength, but because of their hearts. Because they held on to humanity in a system designed to erase it. Because they proved they were more than what they were made to be. Because in the end, they mattered. In this video, we expose the truth buried beneath the armor. We trace the lives of clone troopers who were never meant to live free. We reveal the tragedy of stolen choice, the beauty of brotherhood, and the haunting truth that every clone trooper was doomed from the start. It began in a lab beneath stormy skies, a facility nestled in isolation. Hidden from the galaxy it would one day shape. The Kaminoans worked in silence, sculpting soldiers with unshakable loyalty, designing the perfect army to be used, discarded, and forgotten. From the first breath they took, the clones were labeled as assets. Not sons, not children, but property. Units with numbers. Bred not to question, but to act. And yet, within their eyes, there was depth. There was something more. They bonded over battle drills. They joked in the mess halls. They painted their armor with meaning. They named themselves Fives, Echo Rex, each name a rebellion, each identity a defiance of the cold purpose they were given. Still, questions lingered just below the surface. Who were they without war, without orders, without someone to serve? Could they ever be more than what they were made for? Could a being grown in a tube find meaning outside of conflict? And while most never had time to find the answers, some dared to ask them anyway, because somewhere deep inside their synthetic start, there lived something real, something human, and that humanity was never supposed to be part of the plan. The Jedi marched with them into fire, but rarely walked beside them in peace. They gave commands and called it leadership. They showed gratitude, but never trust. And when the war intensified, so did the silence between them. Clone troopers were celebrated as tools of the Republic. Not protectors, not patriots, but assets. Always ready. Always available. They were thrown at problems until one stuck. And when they died, they were replaced. There was no counseling, no rest, no future beyond deployment. Their worth was measured in combat performance, not in dreams, not in joy, and never in choice. The Jedi, for all their empathy, never saw them clearly. Or maybe they chose not to. Behind every mission was another lie. Another excuse to prolong the fighting. The Senate praised their courage, then ignored their existence. They lived in shadows between battles, invisible unless needed, forgotten when the dust settled. And no matter how loud they shouted, their voices were always drowned by the sound of war drums, because their pain was inconvenient. Their doubts were dismissed, and the world they fought for was never built for them to live in. You can feel it when a clone speaks softly, the weight behind the words, the ache of understanding their own mortality, not just as soldiers, but as disposable lives, designed to end before they ever truly began. They watched their brothers die with no ceremonies, no tributes, just silence, just empty helmets scattered across forgotten fields, each one a reminder that they were next, that they would die nameless, unless they made themselves unforgettable. They found family within the chaos, built it from nothing, shared pain as a language. They fought not for the Republic, but for the men beside them, the ones who understood what it meant to exist on borrowed time. And when Order 66 came, their bodies obeyed, while their hearts shattered, forced to turn on friends, on mentors, on Jedi who treated them like equals in rare moments of clarity. The betrayal wasn't a choice. It was a sentence carried out by their own hands. They wept behind visors, their sorrow buried beneath layers of armor and programming, because even in grief, they were expected to move forward, to keep fighting, to keep forgetting. And yet, Through all that, they became legends. Not because they were engineered to be perfect, but because they rose above that programming. They formed identities where there were none. They became more than anyone expected. Each painted mark on their armor was a story. Each call sign a declaration. From the 501st to the 212th. From Commander Cody to Captain Rex. Every clone carried the weight of generations in a single lifetime. They didn't just follow orders. They made decisions. Saved civilians when told to retreat. Questioned commands when they saw injustice. Chose compassion over compliance. They turned obedience into purpose. Clones like Rex broke away from the path entirely. Removed their chips. Saved what little they could from a system that tried to erase them. The Bad Batch stood apart. A family forged in dysfunction and strength. Proof that divergence was not a defect, but a gift. What they built with limited time, what they achieved despite their origin, was nothing short of astonishing. Because against all odds, they became people. Hope was never given to them. They had to create it from nothing. In the quiet, in the jokes, in the brotherhood that transcended code. They stitched together meaning from scraps. And somehow, that was enough. Even after the fall of the Jedi, after the betrayal they could not prevent. Some resisted, some walked away from everything they knew. They chose to live, not as soldiers, but as survivors. And that choice meant everything. Omega was born from their struggle. A child who wasn't just a copy, but something new. A symbol of what the clones might have become. If only they'd been allowed to grow, to live, to dream without boundaries. And even in their exile, they found each other. Echo rejoined the fight for justice. Crosshair wrestled with guilt and identity. Tech gave his life so others could escape. And Hunter, he carried the weight of every loss with quiet strength. Because they never stopped trying, never stopped hoping that something better could exist beyond the battlefield. And in doing so, they left behind a legacy that defied their programming. In this video, we witnessed the rise and fall of an army that never asked to exist. We explored the depths of loyalty, the ache of brotherhood, the cruelty of design, and the tragedy of never having a choice. The clone troopers were built to serve, not to feel, but they did. They were crafted for obedience, yet they questioned. They were programmed to forget, yet they remembered everything. Every face, every loss, every betrayal. They were told they were the lucky ones, gifted with purpose. But that purpose was a lie, a prison disguised as duty. Their entire lives served someone else's vision, and in the end, their reward was silence. Still, they carved meaning into their short lives. They etched purpose into moments between battles, and somehow, escaped the fate that was written for them before their first breath. Because in the end, they were not just soldiers. They were not just copies. They were not just weapons. They were men. And the fact that they became so much more is what makes their fate so unbearably tragic.